So today we're going to talk a little bit about reporting. I am actually going to address reporting kind of at the highest levels. What are reports? What's the basic structure of the reporting engine? Not the individual reports, but how are they kind of implemented and how do we get them to show up where we want them to show up in the platform? Certainly, when we open up for questions later, if you have questions on specific reports or tools to create them or those things, we'll certainly field those questions. But today, very high level, very simple, very basic. Geez, I just did a new implementation and there's no reports available in the drawing viewer. There's no reports available under reporting. When I go to dynamic spreadsheets, there's no reports available. What the hell is going on? Well, we have to start with the permissions module. So reports are held behind a permissions module so that you and or your clients have full control over what gets exposed and where within the application that it gets exposed. So we come to platform administration, we go to reporting, we get a list of reports that are here, and you can add reports to this, you can make copies of reports, there's all types of things you can do here, but let's talk about the fundamentals. So I'll open up a reporting record, and I'm just going to expand this so we can see the whole thing. Basic attributes, what do I want to call it when people see it? Give it a description. Is it a drawing, data, or move-based? Categories are self-populating. The types are self-populating. Paper size, you can add here, orientation, landscape, or portrait. Then we have these fields down here for the report server, and these fields are kind of key to what we do for an engine. Our default reports that come with the system come from a SQL Server reporting engine. They are RDL files. We know what the server is because that's part of our configuration, so we don't have to put a value for the server path. But we do, for an individual report, have to reference an RDL, and we also can point one report to multiple data sets if we want. We can copy it, use one RDL, rename it something different, point it to different underlying data sets, and actually see different data or see it manipulated in different ways. And that's where you'd make these entries. I won't go too in-depth here, but we can talk about it later, more in-depth if you want. If you don't know SQL Server reporting, or your clients are using Crystal Reports and they have a whole reporting engine built somewhere else, they can actually make those reports available through Evolve by simply pointing an individual report. Hey, I want to use the stuff you have internally, but we also want to point to 6 Crystal reports we have on a Crystal Report server. Great. Enter a server path in here, use the RDL name, and we're passing some generic things that they're going to need to kind of pick up and go with, but it'll point to that report and open up. If it's a drawing-based report or a location-based report, and we'll talk about what these look like when we go to the actual reporting UI for the users, if it's a drawing-based report, we click drawing. That's going to tell the system, hey, when you generate this report, I want you to go out and generate images for each drawing within the report. Yes, I want to use location filters. We're going to see a location filter tree on the left-hand side. And if we want that to be accessible for a given report, we check this checkbox. We have default formats, which are only 2. I want to put it out as a PDF or I want to put it out as Excel. And then if we're doing drawing-based reports, and I would be cautious with this, you do have a control over the legend where you can set a legend width and how many columns that legend is going to be within a report. Sometimes if you have a lot of items that may show up in a legend, you might want to do 2 columns to have them side by side so that they're all on an 8.5 by 11 page versus running off the page. That's where you make those settings. So that's how we define a report record itself. How do we now make that report accessible to individual functional groups, and where within the application is it accessible? So that we have a tab called functional groups. We're just saying that this report is going to be available to, whatever. Pick whatever functional groups you want. You add them in here. Now when people sign in, they do have permissions to this given report. Where do we want that report to be accessible from? We have several options. One is the drawing viewer, so we can actually drawing-based reports. we can make them available in the drawing viewer so that they click that report and it's going to print out that report for the drawing they're looking at that moment in time. Or we can make it available in reports, which is the most common thing. And then some reports, and we will talk a little bit more about this in depth, we have our whole dynamic spreadsheet piece. And we'll get to the specifics about that in a minute, but we have several classifications. Forget the AIMS ones. Those are actually specific to a client. But we have an assets collection, a moves collection, an occupants collection, and a space collection. So you pick where, and it can be one or more places, that this report is going to be made available within the application. So that's how we make a report available. Now, so we're under permissions. Let's go to the drawing viewer real quick. We'll go to drawings. The drawing viewer opens up. I'm going to go select a particular location for my drawings. There's my space plan. I have up here the availability of reports. So if I've made reports available to the drawing viewer, they show up here. So I have a simple drawing with a legend. I won't do anything fancy, but I could pick themes. I could turn layers on and off. And what happens is the image that I'm looking at on the screen is what ends up getting embedded in the report. So I'm going to do a simple drawing with legend. We'll go out and preview that thing. It's going to go out and create an image from this drawing that mimics the screen. And then it's going to go to the report viewer, pass all that information to it. And I must have a window open already. There it is. I have a reporting window open, and then it generates that report. So that's just a simple drawing report. We have one with data. Let's see if that's available. Drawing with legend and data. Again, the whole same process. It's going to go out and create that image and send it out there. But within the drawing viewer, what's important to understand is on the drawing-based reports, the scope is limited to the drawing that I'm looking at that moment in time. So there's my drawing embedded. There's no legend because I didn't select the theme. And then here's all the spaces. Again, this is the core information in here. As a user, if I have permissions to reporting, I can go to reporting on my screen here. And now we're going to see the user-facing reporting engine. Hey, we've given this functional group permissions to these reports. We said that we wanted them available under reporting. So when I come to reports, I'm going to see that. If I click on this particular report, it is drawing-based. So I'm going to see options that can be applied to the drawing and a legend. It also has a location. I've also clicked the location filter. Therefore, I can come through here and say, geez, I want to go see a report. I just want to filter it down to this particular building. I could do floors. I could pick more than one. It's entirely up to me. This is a drawing, so I'm going to do a space plan. And, geez, I'd like to see a theme on it. Let's theme it by area. I can tell it to put labels on or off. In this case, I won't. And if I'm using a legend, I can actually have it say, I want you to total the area and tell me how many rooms are in each thing. So once again, now, in this case, it's only going to come up with one image because I only picked one, but if I had gone a larger scope with locations that have space plans, it would create the images for me. So in this case, we've gone a little bit further. Now we're actually applied a theme to it. You can see my legend because I did legend by area, so it's creating a legend item for each room and its square footage. And then once again, it's giving me some data under there. But in this case, I picked the scope by this location tree. If I go to field list, you'll notice the location tree is entirely disabled because the field list has no reference to or no dependency on a particular location. I'll hit preview. This is a pretty simple list, and there's my report. I have the ability to take these reports, do some configuration. So if I come up and do my simple drawing with legend, which is very similar to what we did before, instead of previewing it, I may want to save it. So, hey, I've gone and created this report, and I filtered it for a specific location, and I want to be able to recall that report without having to go and clicking the filters and doing what I want to do. I can click Save It, give it a name. And essentially what it's doing is it's just saving that configuration. It doesn't go and generate the report. It just saves that configuration. So if I go to Saved Reports, my report ends up being listed there. I have a few of them. My report ends up being listed there, and you can see all the configuration that I used on the previous screen is saved there, so I don't have to do anything other than preview it. So this is just saving configurations to be recalled. So a good example might be, geez, I have 3 properties and I want to create reports that are individual to each of them. I go and create 3 configurations, save them under property 1, property 2, and property 3. Now I can just come to the Save Report screen, click Preview, all the filters are predefined. I also have the ability to publish reports. So if I take this report and say that I now want to actually go out and publish that report, and I'll do it as my report. In this case, it's actually going to go out and generate that report. We save this as a PDF. So when all is said and done, I'll be able to go to Published Reports. So the published report is completed. I'll go to Published Reports. And in this case, this is nothing more than a listing of PDF and Excel files that I've created. So there's nothing for me to select. These are all predefined. I'm literally just opening them and previewing them. So that's the basic mechanics of the reporting stuff. Dynamic spreadsheets. What is it? What does it mean? Why is it different? Well, it's different in that we have an awful lot of related collections across the data within Evolve. So I may have one room that has 3 or 4 cost centers assigned to it, and 2 or 3 occupants, 4 or 5 contacts. So there's an awful lot of related data in there. And there are times when I want to see a record 5 times because it has 5 separate cost centers. I want to see that here's this cost center, has this percentage, and just give me a report that lists out each cost center and its percentage associated with the room. What Dynamic Spreadsheets does, which is very different than most of the other reports, is as I turn columns on and off, but when you turn columns on and off, that's what is going to get sent. That's the filter that's going to get sent to this. So if I were to turn all of these on, I might see room 004 5 times there because I've said I want to see the contacts, I want to see the occupants, I want to see the cost centers, and I'm going to see that room 5 times or 6 times because it has different information associated with it. When I put out a report, I'll see multiple records. If I filter it down to just the fundamentals, and when I say filter it down, it's basically columns, what I turn on and off, that has a direct impact on the data that gets output in this particular case. So let's go and turn on column occupant name. But you would see the record count can go up and down. I have the ability to go create filters. So if I come up here and do manage filters, I have the ability, very much kind of what we do with labels and themes inside of the drawing viewer, I can go create filters that are specific to what I want. I want to see all the spaces where the category is office and the class is open office, and I want to see them on the 4th floor of this building. Just string together a whole bunch of criteria. You can now apply filters here. And then once again, I can display a list of reports, whether they're drawing or whatever based, and make that information available. And let's just see. When I select a report and I have a whole bunch of columns open, Dynamic Spreadsheets is going to show me in gray all the columns that are going to be available for filtering in the report, and it will highlight in red those data fields that are not included in the report. So if I create a filter on them or if I sort by them, I'm not going to get results that I'm expecting. So when you select a report, you will see in red the columns that do not apply to that particular report. We're looking at the underlying view for that report. and then turning the columns red or not. And then once again, location filters if you want to use them. If it's a drawing-based thing, what is a category, what is the label? There are no themes available in this because essentially a drawing gets themed by your filtering criteria, whatever that may be. So if I apply a filter to this, and I probably should have thought about this ahead of time, if I apply a filter to this, open up a drawing report, it's going to highlight those spaces that meet whatever filter criteria I have. And we have, like I said, we have several scopes in here. We can look at space data. We can look at occupant data. And I get to assign what reports become visible based on the scope here, what we saw before. Moves, we can take a look at move-based stuff. And we can take a look at asset-based stuff. But once again, the key here is I pick and choose the fields that get displayed. I can apply custom filters to it, and I can open up a report from here. Very often what happens, to be honest with you, most of the clients that use this section could care less about our printed reports. They're mostly coming in here and getting the data to download a spreadsheet and manipulate it in some way, shape, or form. Some of them have predefined Excel reports that they simply download the data, stick it into place, and it is the data source for an Excel report. That's more often than not how this information gets used here. But there's an awful lot here for you to be able to use. With that being said, that's kind of at the highest level